All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our March 2025 Media Ed Club gathering. My name is Wes Fryer, and I am coming to you today from Charlotte, North Carolina, where I'm a middle school teacher. And I got to start teaching AP Computer Science for high school. Last week, we had a faculty change, so I am in a dynamic and exciting teaching mode, which I'm sure you can relate to. Today's topic is participatory storytelling and the news. And when I set up this session back in December, um, I wouldn't have known all the things that are going to be happening. And I think we could have a subtitle to this as like, what the heck is going on, especially with regard to the information environment and how social media and our information environment is affecting and influencing politics and what we're seeing in the news cycle and just in the ways that people are communicating and perceiving reality and communicating. So here's a little outline of where we're going to go. I had dropped, oh, good, Cameron, your son's teaching that. Maybe I need to reach out to your son for some help. I want to do check-ins. And so some of you have already started just in the chat. If you will let us know where you're coming from geographically, what your educational role is. And then if you want to tackle this big question, what is a thought you have about roles or role that social media specifically played in our current U.S. political situation. Um, that is going to be what we are going to tackle today. So I'm going to go over some announcements, which is really just to make sure everybody knows about some upcoming events with the Media Lab. And then I'm going to share a little bit, I don't know if it'll be 15 minutes or not, but I'm going to share a little bit of some key ideas from this great podcast conversation that we recommended. If you had a chance to listen to in advance, great. If not, it's with Kate Starbird, and I think she really is an excellent analyst and an academic, but also just observer of the information environment that we live in, and especially the ways that um, myth and conspiracy, and also we talk about misinformation and disinformation, continue to shape the conversations that people are having, the perceptions that people are having, and this idea of participatory storytelling. I just found it really compelling when I heard this podcast. So we're going to record the whole group part of this, but then we'll go to breakout rooms for at least 15 minutes. And I'm just going to invite you to discuss some of these questions, including the roles that social media has played in our current situation. So excellent. Great to see folks coming in from Ontario, from Oklahoma, from Los Angeles, from Auburn, Washington, lots of Scarsdale, New York. Fantastic. Um, we do have a collaborative notes document, and I will admit to you in my haste of getting prepared for everything today, I just have the slides prepared, but you can go into this document and you can let me make sure I've got the sharing set up. What I do is I'll just change, yeah, it's set up for commenting. So if you'd like to add links to our conversation today, I will go ahead and put in our 3 March. And we're going to talk about participatory storytelling. And if somebody wants to go ahead and put in the link to the slideshow, I will do it. It won't be as fancy, but we'll do it really quick. I really do like using Google Docs like this to be able to keep track of running meeting notes and things like that. And I like doing this in a reverse chronological order. So I shared the link to the slideshow earlier. Here is the link to the doc, and please feel free to go ahead and edit that and shoot. I'm going to go ahead and just give everyone edit access, and I'll turn it back to commenting after we're all finished. Okay, so let's do a little announcements. The Media Lab, as you know, sends out regular emails about events. And so coming up this week is a 1.5-day first Media Ed Research Jam. I think there are 25 spots, and I don't know how many of those are taken, but this is an opportunity to specifically address challenges of teaching about and with media in colleges and universities. And so if you are a university educator, this is a fantastic opportunity to jump in with. All of these you can go to just mediaeducationlab.com and under events, you'll be able to find the registration. But this one is a day and a half. That will be this week. We have two different events that are coming up on March 12th, and this first one is called Free Speech in an Era of Digital Platforms. And Catherine Morris, who's the Assistant Director of the Media Lab, is going to be leading this one. And I got to tell you, I think discussions around free speech and the Constitution and, you know, this is my opinion, but why we want to have some limits and regulation upon speech. Because if you have had an opportunity to learn at all about spices like 4chan or 8chan and just what the completely unfiltered web can contain, it can be pretty horrific. It can be illegal. It can include CSAM, exploitive, content about, minors and young people. It can include all sorts of things. But of course, disinformation and hate speech, those have some First Amendment protections in the United States. We have an international audience, so free speech looks different in different places. But I'm really excited about that. I hope they're going to be recording that because I don't think I'm going to be able to attend that one live. But just like this session, I'm pretty confident that it'll be recorded. But the same day in the afternoon, Eastern Time at 1 to 2 p.m., we're going to have the civic implications of safety in an online world. And again, there's a lot of really, I think, important overlap to the contemporary issues that we're facing today with the news, but with teaching and the intersection with social media, whether it comes to things like bullying and privacy, reputation management, health. There's just so many issues, and I'm really, really excited that the Media Education Lab continues these events and provide opportunities like this for us to get together and learn. So what I'd like to do is just share a little bit of a summary with you of this Kate Starbird podcast. And gosh, I don't know, I should probably be able to do a poll, shouldn't I? If I was fancier, I would do this. Just let me know in the chat if you have had a chance, if you're familiar with Kate Starbird and her work, and if you had a chance to listen to this podcast. When I linked this originally on our website, I linked her Mastodon account. And Kate is actually a lot more active on Blue Sky. That is a very Twitter-like. It was founded by Twitter before it was purchased by Elon. And so she is a really, really fantastic researcher at the University of Washington. And so as you can see, 15 hours ago, she was posting. She's just real active in terms of things that she's sharing here. So rather than the Mastodon account, I would recommend following Kate on Blue Sky. And if you're not active on Blue Sky, I really have found that, along with Facebook, to be my best interactive platforms for social media and for engagement today, since I'm really not using Twitter that much. These are the required and optional media links that we gave for today's session. And ideally, if you're able to, it's great to listen or watch or read what we've got listed under required media. But this is a podcast from December 8th, 2024, and this is one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. One of the things I'm absolutely convinced that we can do, because one of the questions a lot of people have is, what do we do? What kinds of advocacy can we do? What kinds of things? There's a lot of chaotic things that are occurring today politically and within our society. And I mean, whoever is the president and whatever's going on in Congress, I think sharing trusted voices and especially podcasts or newsletters that we read can absolutely be fantastic, because being able to tap into somebody, for instance, who's really passionate about topics around media literacy, in this case around democracy, representative democracy, the ways in which there's this intersection between social media platforms and the kinds of discourse that needs to take place in a representative democracy for people to perceive the policy options and just reality, right? Shared reality. It's important. So this is a conversation that Justin Hendricks, who is the head of Tech Policy Press, had in December, about a month after the last presidential election, with Kate Starbird. It is a 33-minute podcast conversation. I listened to it probably back in December when it came out, and then I've listened to it again recently. And I'll kind of summarize for you some of my key takeaways. But in addition to this, this is kind of interesting. I don't know if you do this now. I use some different AI tools to create transcripts. The one that I used here is one of my absolute favorites, called Descript. And Descript is a freemium model, so you get a little, some free uses and then you can pay. But being able to upload audio and video and real readily get, in this case, a time-stamped transcript like this, you identify who the speakers are. It's really, really fantastic. And of course, then you could, use this transcript. You can use AI tools to further analyze that. But that was one of the links that I provided. In addition, there's a couple other podcasts. This one was on the Ezra Klein show, and this was a best of, but it really is about, again, how the media landscape has been affecting political discourse. And so this was republished on December 13th. But this was a conversation with Sean Illing, I think, and his book, let's see, the Paradox of Democracy. Um, he and his co-author contend it's better to think of democracy less as a government type and more as an open communicative culture. And so they're asking, what does our communicative culture, our fragmented mix of cable news, Twitter, X, TikTok, YouTube, WhatsApp, what does it mean for our democracy? And so this is, again, questions that we're tackling today in this webinar. And then lastly, this is the book that Illing and Gershberg have written, and it's called The Paradox of Democracy, Free Speech, Open Media, and Perilous Persuasion. I have not read this book. I've just listened to them. But again, one of the reasons I think podcasts can be so fantastic is because of the way it can lead us to other sources and other materials like books and videos and other things that will let us have a deeper dive into those ideas and those particular people. So Kate Starbird actually just won a faculty award at the University of Washington. And so 5 days ago, and I have gotten through about half of this, she received the University Faculty Lecture Award, and it was established in 1974. And the full recording of her presentation, which I think is about 70 minutes, is available online. And so it's called A Spotlight on Rumors. And it really is an excellent overview of her research, how her research changed, over the past, 5 to 7 years or so, how the changes in the platforms and their either opacity or transparency. And like in the case of Twitter, the API, you can't just grab, thousands of tweets and analyze them now. But I will add that to our list of optional resources, and I would really commend this to you as well, because I haven't found a more recent interview with Kate Starbird than the one we have in December from Tech Policy Press. But this is an outstanding summary of the ways in which they have been analyzing the information landscape and these flows of information and her current thinking, because this was just 5 days ago. So here are some just summary points that I'll share with you, and then I want to open it up to see if people would like to ask questions or engage in a little bit of whole group dialogue, and then we'll go to breakout rooms and ask you to talk about these kinds of things together. And the first one is, what is participatory storytelling? Well, as Starbird talks about this on this particular podcast, it really is an interactive, multimodal sharing of ideas and links, and in some cases, well, stories, but disinformation, misinformation. It can be true stuff. It can be stuff that's fictitious, but it is not just top down. It is also bottom up. And I don't have the link in here right now. I can go look at it in my Mastodon or Blue Sky feed. But I had just listened to an outstanding interview, which I think was actually also with Ezra Klein. And maybe I'll pull it out when we're in breakout rooms, and then I'll share it at the end. But this is an author. He's a Cuban American. He worked for the CIA for years. And one of the best things I think he said, and he's coming from a conservative standpoint, and he says he's an independent, but he's supporting a lot of the more extreme positions that we would see Trump and the MAGA group supporting today. But what he said that I think is so true is that Donald Trump has very effectively mastered our news cycle today. And I think participatory storytelling, where all of the ideas, and these can be things as crazy as, Haitian or other immigrants, I think they were Haitian, right, in Minnesota, were eating cats, or, FEMA is trying to take charge of Western North Carolina so that the lithium mines can be seized by the government, or all different kinds of things. They don't just flow down, they also flow up, and they're amplified. And I think Elon Musk uh, does this a lot, and certainly Donald Trump does. And one of the things that she says that I agree with, and I'm interested in what your thoughts are, is that the right in the United States, she contends, has been more effective telling stories and not worrying about fact checking, but just telling their story. And what she's saying, and I've heard other authors talk about this too, is that when we talk about echo chambers and where people are with their media consumption, with the right specifically, many people are less concerned about whether an individual story or link or news item is true or not, and whether or not it fits into the overall narrative and story that they believe and that they want to see promoted and amplified when it comes to politics. For instance, thinking that we have a huge crime problem across the country, irrespective of what statistics might be, or today we have a lot of blaming of immigrants, and we've got a real ramp up of not only security forces but military forces that are being tasked to the border to address the border crisis. And so anyway, that's one of her points. She also says this, and I think this is pretty powerful, that you really can't win any kind of competition if you're only on defense. You've got to have some offense. And so my goal here in this presentation is not to be promoting a single political view. I really want to understand the landscape of communication, media, and information as it continues to evolve. And I think it's essential that we do have shared perceptions of reality in order to have an effective government. And so I personally feel that Starbird's contention that, for instance, if you look at the last presidential election, you had a number of people, on the left or with the Biden administration playing defense, fact checking, and it seems like a lot of the media does that as well because that's what the media has historically done. But that isn't what many on the right have done. They have continued to engage in this participatory storytelling. And so I think that's a very strong point. She argues that we need a long-term focus. And she's saying we need to focus more on building new communication structures rather than fixing old ones. And that's where I think platforms like Blue Sky and Mastodon as short-form social media platforms really do hold a lot of promise, especially Mastodon, which is geekier and harder to get your head around. You have to decide what server to join, but it's federated in the same way that email is. And there's a number of people, Ethan Zuckerman, a lot of other folks that are working on this idea of how do we build a better internet. One of the other points that this Cuban American who was a former CIA officer and spoke, I think, on the Ezra Klein show, I'll get this link and add it. He said is he feels like, and he's written a self-published book about this, that social media and our information environment today lends itself more towards destruction and chaos than building and constructively, for instance, promoting trust. And so one of the big challenges that we have today is the low levels of institutional trust and trust in politicians, trust in all kinds of things, trust in science, trust in vaccines. There's all of these issues. And he is, I think, in a prescient way, observing that the short form attention economy nature of Twitter X and many of the tools that we have, Facebook, TikTok, they don't lend themselves necessarily to the construction of civil discourse and the building up of institutions and the raising up of trust, but rather they really allow for groups and individuals to tear down and even to foment chaos and to really be disruptive. And that's really, really challenging. So those are a few ideas. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. One of the things that I really like about this format that we're doing is we're not recording everything and we're going to breakout rooms where stuff isn't recorded. So we may have some deeper thoughts after we, come back out of our breakout sessions, but I've just thrown a lot of stuff at you. Anybody want to share a thought about Kate Starbird, about the information environment that we're seeing? Do you think that contention that we need to focus on building new systems is on target, or do you think we could still, save Twitter X or save Facebook? What are your thoughts? Grab the microphone. We've got a lot of good discussion, and if Scott or others want to give voice to some of those comments, I've not been following the chat as I've been sharing, but go ahead, Mary. Please grab the mic. You got to unmute though. I think you're still muted.
Sorry. What you just said is really resonating with me because my community college students are always, as they sort of get glimpses of what communications technology looked like across the ages, they say things like, why did people used to write so long? Why did they used to use such big words? In some ways, it makes me wonder if social media is kind of changing the language centers in our brains as a species, where we want to process smaller chunks and we don't have the cultural patience to wade through the fact checking, right? Maybe that's why fact checking is the first thing to go out the window, because if you only have so many words in your tweet or your X or whatever they're calling it now, of course you want something bombastic and, emotion inducing and very careful, liner notes or citations are not going to get read. They're not going to get retweeted in the same way.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Kurt was commenting in there, yeah, who is the we? And I want to be real sensitive to this. Like, I bet we're all over the political spectrum, right? Donald Trump was elected by a narrow majority. It was like 49%, but like we're pretty split in the country. And I would guess, I don't know, but this is going to be seen by a lot of people. We've got a lot of folks in the room. We've got 25 of us in the room. So the we, in terms of trying to figure this out, I think are educators and academics and others working in civic society to try to figure out how we're going to both educate around media literacy, but just also have an effective communication and information exchange environment. I mean, one of the things, and I haven't found this yet, but because I totally should have put this in as an optional, but this the CIA officer podcast, he says, like, and this is probably Marshall McLuhan and many other theorists, like almost everything is downstream of how we communicate and get information, right? So the ways in which we get information, we just had our local paper, the Charlotte Observer, finally dump all of its printed versions in the last year. That's happened in a lot of smaller communities, but it's such a big deal to fundamentally change how you get your information and then how you interact around it. There's a really good podcast I listened to recently just about reading, to your point, Mary, and just how, and this is a lot of things, but like in middle school and high school, statistics show we're not asking kids to read full books. We're reading excerpts. Even Animal Farm, which is like 80 or 90 pages, some schools are just reading an excerpt. They're not reading the whole thing. And so when we're not training our brains to engage in long form reading, when we are mainly consuming, reels and videos, when we're in such a short form media environment, there's a contention that it's changing brains. Let's get some other thoughts. Yeah, Ralph. Oh, no, he wasn't. See, this is like an auction. You move your hand and they're going to say, "Oh, that was you."
Oh, yeah,
Go
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead, Ralph. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to, I've been having some conversations with people who've been talking about the reactions to a lot of the moves in the very recent past and the kind of reception that politicians are getting when they have town hall meetings. So they're now being encouraged, of course, to not have town hall meetings, but to do video things that they can very easily control in the midst of all this. So that's something but I think the question we have is, is this legitimately, the truth in lending of people finding out what maybe a lot of them voted for, and now they're getting what they voted for and they're upset about it. So.
Go ahead, Olga.
Hi, thanks, Wes. I think it's great that people like Kate Starbird and other researchers and in the academic space are thinking about rethinking entire information structures, because I think her personal / professional strains that she's been under, especially regarding Jim Jordan, the congressman from Ohio, who has made her life utterly, terrible, with subpoenaing information, the forcing of closing down some of the academic work that has been done at University of Washington, as well as the Stanford Observatory, et cetera. And I'm heartened that she is taking a position where she's saying, we can't continue to just work on the fringes. We need entirely new systems. And I think that's the only way to address what is happening, not just politically, but sometimes, and in the education space, because I think we always feel like we're 10 steps behind. And by the time we figure things out, we're only 3 steps ahead, and they're still 7 steps ahead of us. And so I'm really glad that, this is part of the focus of the conversation.
Thank you. One of the sessions we did back in October focused on Renee DiResta's book, Invisible Rulers. And Renee, as well as Kate, have been the recipient of really horrific online attacks and targeting. And it is so unfortunate that that is part of our environment that we have today in terms of this war that some are engaging in on academics and on those who are doing, for instance, research about information, disinformation, online rumors, conspiracies, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that there's a need for a real collaboration between a lot of different organizations and groups. I think Starbird says in this podcast something I've thought for a long time, and that is that we're not going to media literacy ourselves out of polarization, but that doesn't mean we don't need to engage in this work. This is really important work, and it's an important part of what we need as citizens. But it's not going to be the solution, because these issues are so much bigger than just like what we're doing in civics classes across the country, or what we're doing or not doing with literacy. Let's get another person to chime in, and then I think we'll go to breakout rooms. Anybody else want to share a thought? And then we'll have non-recorded opportunities to engage in conversation. Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, Kate was in the WNBA. I don't think I actually knew that. So okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and open up our breakout rooms. And what I'm going to encourage you to do is spend some time introducing yourselves to each other. I think one of the best things we can do when we're synchronously, even if we're not in the same place, but we're live at the same time, is get to make some connections with others. And we're all interested in media literacy and these topics in some way or other. And so please, please go ahead and spend some of this time to make some connections. I'm going to leave us.
Oh no, you muted yourself.
Thank you so much. Gosh, do I ever feel like an idiot?
It was only that last sentence.
Oh, it was? Okay. As well as discussing some of these topics that we brought up. And we can certainly move folks. Sometimes it doesn't look like we have too many recorders in here, but I think Ralph and I found ourselves with like 3 auto recorders last time. So hopefully that won't happen with your breakout room. But go ahead and spend some time making some connections, sharing some thoughts about this, and then we'll come back together and invite some people to share things with the whole group. I'm going to go ahead and open up the rooms, and we will pause the recording.
Make the decision to become leaders, and what their incentives are, and what their benefits are, what their goals are. There's this sense that people aspire to positions of power just for their own benefit, and I understand why people think that, but I think that is really unfortunate, and it would be great, I think, to get back to understanding what ideals of public service are, and why someone might want to be a local mayor, or might want to serve in their school board, beyond just mere self-interest, to just kind of reinvigorate that recognition of what leadership means in public life, particularly at the local level.
Thanks. Yeah, and I mentioned I'll drop two links in here. I'm meeting with a group that Lucy Gray out of Chicago has organized called Thrive EDU. There's a link to a Substack there. One of the things we've met four times Thursday nights, kind of a little bit like the Media Lab's doing on Mondays. I was like, let's process this change, but let's figure out what to do. What kinds of actions can we take? So that second link is a Notion AI database that we've called the Menu of Resistance. And it's not fully fleshed out what all of that means, but one of the things to what Kurt was saying was like supporting public officials who are taking a stand. There's so much danger today in speaking out about anything, but especially if you're an elected official, you can just be the absolute target of horrible vitriol. And both Renee DeResta and Kate Starbird have experienced that sort of at a mega amplified level. But unfortunately, each one of us takes risks as we speak out in our communities. And I think that it is important for us to figure out what our menu is of things that we want to do. And if you don't want to even think about menu of resistance, like the menu of advocacy for media literacy, right? How are we going to advocate for the goals of media literacy in this environment that we have? Who else would like to share a thought? I know there were great conversations going on in the different breakouts. Again, feel free to nominate somebody if you don't want to be sharing yourself. Oh, Cameron's talking. Cameron, go ahead. You just unmute yourself, though. I think you gotta. Yep, Cameron, you gotta unmute. She's smiling and laughing, but I don't know if she was wanting to. You may be having some microphone difficulty. Yep, she is. Anybody in Cameron's group want to share a little bit about what you all were talking about?
Sure, Wes, I'll just jump in. One of the things we were talking about was that there are so many resources within media literacy education, but what we don't have is a lot of communication between, it's not getting down to the people necessarily in the K-12 spaces. And so it's so critical to promote what will work and not reinvent things that are already out there. So Common Sense Media came up in the K-8 space, resources for 9 through 12 high school teachers. Some are, they really work well for science teachers. Others work well for social studies. Here in New Jersey, Rutgers University has the Center for Civic Education. And no social studies teacher ever has to create from scratch, their own resources to teach anything regarding media literacy. It is all there for them, and they can pick and choose and then tailor it to fit any lesson plan that they have. And I think that's a really critical factor in really promoting media literacy education in K-12, so that they don't feel that this is yet another thing that's on their plate, and what they will probably do is just marginalize it because they're busy, and it's hard to figure out ways to get them to really engage with the materials and sort of cut through it. We don't have a resource problem; we have a distribution problem.
Well, right. And this is part of the attention economy issue, right? Is that we've got so many different sources of information and we feel like we have so little time. Cameron mentioned Finland resources, and I just dropped a link to a blog post I wrote called Media Literacy Lessons from Finland. A wonderful thing I got to do 2 summers ago was go to the University of Washington. They had a grant that supported this, and they brought in media literacy educators from Finland to share how they have put media literacy activities and curricular requirements, throughout their K-12 curriculum and what they're doing and how they're trying to build resiliency against things like, disinformation attacks from nearby Russia and from other sources. I think we should build stuff together. One of the best professional development, some of the best professional development experiences I've ever had are getting together online, in person, a variety of both, but like building stuff together. And so as we identify affinity groups or different, like I'm teaching middle school right now, teaching media literacy, I really would love for us to do more collaboration, because there's so much that's out there, but in order to apprehend what is it, how can I use it, that's going to look different for different people. And I'm talking too much. Who else could share?
Can I just add something? Olga, I completely agree that there's distribution problems at the center of it, but I just wanted to drop in that you mentioned civics education. And unfortunately, that's a term that's now being used to develop programs in universities that are being really well funded from the right, that are, attempts to, it's kind of part of the reaction against with the so-called wokeism of undergraduate education. And a lot of them are, they of course do that deceptive thing of pretending to be nonpartisan, and what they are actually is trying to support, again, the things that Bezos is promoting in the Washington Post and all of that. So it's just become, in some places, Texas especially, really problematic.
Well, thank you, Ralph. I don't know if you all have seen in your feeds, because it all depends what you're searching for and how you've trained the machine and the feed in terms of what you're fed. But I mean, I have a whole separate YouTube channel that really is very conservative, very Second Amendment gun prepper, and so I get like these courses that I need to take through different institutions and nonprofits to help me learn my history about, the United States. And this gets back to participatory storytelling, though, and I think that, for instance, as we want to support human rights, or we want to support representative democracy and the idea of compromise, and Federalist 10, like support of minority voices and not just majoritarianism, we got to tell a good story. We've got to think about how this can be organized, and influencers can be um, how influencers can be equipped and empowered to do that kind of advocacy. And I think there's a lot of work that we can do in that area. Who else would like to share? We're gonna go about 4 more minutes, and I unfortunately have to go teach a class. Let's get some other folks to share. Please don't hesitate. Grab the mic. Go
So
ahead.
I was with Scott and Rita and Randall, and we talked about a bunch of different things. But in terms of how can it be organized, how can influencers be empowered, one need that we discussed was just facilitating discussions amongst our students, amongst the lay people who are not necessarily media scholars, who are pushing themselves to be critically digesting everything that they consume, and about how sometimes the bias that you consume news through, if you're a student only getting your news through a certain TikToker, you're going to adopt the emotional attitude towards that news of that TikToker. And it sometimes can create division, even when people are basically on the occupy the same space on a spectrum. Then we talked about the personal. And Scott, if you don't mind, I'd love to share what you mentioned, how trying to do a comparative media analysis assignment where you open Google News on two different devices and see how the algorithm is feeding you different info. Scott tried to do it with YouTube, but it apparently was too personal, that students, but well, Scott, let me not put words in your mouth. How did that student respond exactly?
Oh, you're summarizing it perfectly. Yeah, when I proposed that activity, a lot of students felt that that was too personal, which I thought was a little ironic because it's too personal for their classmates, but meanwhile it's being sold to the highest bidder to who knows how many people.
We also talked about how we do need to be careful when we ask students to do searches for particular things, because that can train the machine, can influence their feed. And as a media literacy educator, that's part of my journey, has been creating some different, whole Gmail accounts, and then following different things and seeing just, here's what's being presented. During the election, it was widely divergent. Can we get another thought? Yeah, go ahead, Cameron.
Actually, I was just going to ask you, when you were talking about the Ezra Klein podcast, who was it you said you listened to on that? Set so
I
far
will
back
go,
in time?
yeah, I'm going to put that on I didn't,
Okay. I was just sorry to
it was
berate
it
you.
was a pretty recent Ezra Klein show. Let me see if I can find it. And it
I've
was
got my
the,
whole
oh,
week
nope,
planned now of all the
here
stuff
it
I'm
is.
going to have to
Here it
listen
is.
to and
This
watch.
is it. It was February 25th. A theory of
Okay.
media that explains 15 years of politics. And I will add this. Very conservative, former CIA officer, and Martin Gurry. His book he wrote was called The Revolt of the Public. And so I'm not going to share him saying, hey, I agree with everything that they said, but I felt it was very insightful and very on point, especially with regard to what we're talking about today: participatory storytelling, the ways in which tribes are telling stories, and in some cases can be less concerned with fact checking than with, is this part of the narrative? Is this part of the story that's being told? Does this support the emotions, the feelings, the worldview that we support? And I found that to be pretty insightful. Okay, well, folks, I am going to take the chat and the great links, and I have not been able to follow all of that, but thank you so much for coming and participating. This is quick. I look forward to this every single month. I did drop in my email and also a Calendly, and I know I've missed some appointments with Ralph. Ralph, I hope you'll forgive me. I'll just go on the record because sometimes life gets busy. But if you've got ideas for things you'd like to do, this is our time, and I really really value the opportunity to network and connect, and for us also, just like I said, to serve as filters for each other, for media, for podcasts, for books. That kind of filtering and sharing can be life-changing. We've all probably experienced that, where somebody shared an author in a book and we read it and, oh my gosh, that really, changed or redirected or helped shape what the work that we're doing or the ways that we're thinking and we're perceiving the world. So please continue to check in with the Media Education Lab. We're going to be here again next month, and I've got to confirm, but I think we've got a pretty good topic for next month, and we'll have the next 3 months probably will get put out. But we don't have those set in stone. And if you've got ideas, share. If you want us to come dive into the stories that you're helping students tell, or the work that you're doing, would love to do that. And again, apologize, we're going to cut off, but it's time for me to go teach media literacy to some middle schoolers. So I hope you have a wonderful week. Hang in there. Be hopeful. Don't lose hope, because there's so many of us out here that care and that really want to do this good work, no matter who is in power, no matter what the news is. There's important work that we've got to carry on, and building community, sharing resources with each other, and helping figure out what our menu of advocacy is. Like, this is among the work that we have to do together. So have a great week, everybody, and a great month. We'll see you in April.